The smoke still clung to Clara Garrison's hair 3 months after she watched her homestead burn to ash, the scent a phantom that followed her across the Kansas prairie like a persistent ghost. She had been 22 when the fire took everything, when the drought-dried timber of her family's cabin went up like kindling in the August heat of 1878, taking with it her parents, her younger brother, and the only life she had ever known. Now she wandered from town to town with nothing but the clothes on her back, a worn saddlebag, and eyes that had seen too much loss for someone so young. The sun beat down mercilessly as Clara trudged along the dusty road leading into Wilson, Kansas. Her boots, once sturdy leather, now had holes worn through the soles. Her dress, a faded blue calico that had been her mother's, hung loose on her frame. She had lost weight during her months of wandering, surviving on scraps of work she could find in various towns, odd jobs that lasted a day or two before she moved on. Something inside her could not stay still, as if remaining in one place would allow the memories to catch up and drown her. Wilson was like most Kansas towns she had passed through, a collection of wooden buildings lining a main street, false fronts making them appear grander than they were. A mercantile, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith, and scattered houses marked the settlement. Cattle pens sat at the edge of town near the railroad tracks, and Clara could hear the lowing of livestock waiting to be shipped east. The town had that particular smell of dust, manure, and hope that characterized every cattle town in Kansas. Her stomach growled painfully. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, when a kind woman in the last town had given her half a loaf of bread. Clara pressed a hand to her middle and kept walking, scanning the buildings for any sign of work. The mercantile might need someone to sweep or stock shelves. The hotel might have laundry that needed doing. She had learned to ask, to swallow her pride, to do whatever it took to earn enough for a meal and perhaps a place to sleep that was not the hard ground. The mercantile owner, a portly man with suspicious eyes, turned her away before she finished her question. The hotel manager, a thin woman with a pinched face, told her they had no work. Clara tried the saloon, standing at the back door rather than entering through the front, but the bartender waved her off without a word. She stood in the street, the afternoon sun turning the world into shimmering waves of heat, and felt the familiar weight of hopelessness settling on her shoulders. A wagon rattled past, kicking up dust that made her cough. The driver did not look at her. Two women walking together on the boardwalk noticed her and whispered to each other, their eyes judgmental. Clara knew what she looked like, a vagabond, someone to be pitied or avoided. She had become invisible in her wandering, just another soul lost in the vast expanse of the West. She was about to leave Wilson behind, to continue down the road to the next town, when she noticed a ranch entrance just beyond the edge of the settlement. A wooden sign proclaimed it the Xerxes Ranch, and through the gate she could see a large barn, several corrals, and in the distance, a substantial ranch house. Clara had worked on ranches before, mucking stalls, mending fences, helping in kitchens. Ranch work was hard, but it paid, and sometimes it came with meals and a place in the bunkhouse or barn. The walk to the ranch took 20 minutes, her tired legs protesting each step. By the time she reached the yard, sweat plastered her hair to her forehead, and her vision swam slightly from hunger and heat. Several men worked near the corrals, their attention focused on a group of horses. Clara approached slowly, not wanting to startle anyone or appear threatening. One of the men noticed her first, a young cowhand who could not have been more than 19. He stared at her openly, then called out to someone near the barn. A man emerged from the shadowy interior, and even in her exhausted state, Clara could not help but notice him. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard work. He wore typical cowboy attire, dust-covered trousers, a faded shirt, a worn leather vest, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his face that caught her attention, weathered but handsome, with strong features and eyes that were a startling blue even from a distance. He walked toward her with an easy, confident stride, and as he got closer, she could see he was perhaps 26 or 27, young to own a ranch of this size if the sign indicated he was the owner. His expression was guarded, but not unkind. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep, with the slight drawl common to men who spent their lives outdoors in the West. Clara straightened her spine, trying to summon dignity despite her appearance. "I'm looking for work, sir. Any kind of work. I can cook, Clean, mend, work with animals. I'm a hard worker and I do not ask for much in payment, just meals and a place to sleep." He studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes taking in her ragged appearance, the exhaustion evident in her face, the way she swayed slightly on her feet. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara Garrison." "I am Fletcher Xerxes. This is my ranch." He paused, seemed to consider something, then said, "When did you last eat, Miss Garrison?" The kindness in the question nearly undid her. She had grown accustomed to suspicion and rejection, not concern. "Yesterday morning," she admitted quietly. Fletcher's jaw tightened. He turned and called out, "Tommy, go tell Maria we have a guest for dinner. Tell her to prepare a plate right away." The young cowhand who had first spotted her nodded and ran toward the ranch house. "Come with me," Fletcher said, gesturing toward the house. "You can eat first, then we will talk about work." Clara followed him across the yard, her legs trembling now that she allowed herself to feel how tired she truly was. The ranch house was larger up close, a well-built structure with a wide porch and rocking chairs. Fletcher led her around to the back entrance, into a large kitchen that smelled wonderfully of baking bread and roasting meat. A Mexican woman in her 50s looked up from the stove, her round face breaking into a concerned expression when she saw Clara. "Dios mío, this poor girl," she said, her English flavored with a Spanish accent. Sit, niña, I will get you food." Fletcher pulled out a chair at the large wooden table, and Clara sank into it gratefully. Within minutes, Maria placed a plate before her, piled high with beef, beans, fresh bread, and roasted vegetables. Clara tried to eat slowly to maintain some decorum, but hunger won out and she ate quickly, barely tasting the food in her desperation to fill her empty stomach. Fletcher sat across from her, watching quietly. When she finally slowed down, the worst of her hunger satisfied, he said, "Tell me about yourself, Miss Garrison. Where are you from?" Clara set down her fork, suddenly self-conscious. "I had a homestead about 60 miles north of here with my family. 3 months ago there was a fire. The drought had everything so dry and we do not know how it started, perhaps a spark from the stove, perhaps lightning. It spread so fast." Her voice caught and she took a breath. "My parents and my younger brother, they did not make it out. I was outside drawing water from the well. By the time I realized what was happening, the house was engulfed. I could not reach them." The pain of that memory was still sharp, still capable of stealing her breath. She forced herself to continue. "There was nothing left. Everything burned. The house, the barn, our livestock perished. I had nothing, no family, no home, no way to rebuild. So I started walking. I've been moving from town to town, taking work where I can find it, but nothing permanent. I cannot seem to stop moving." Maria made a soft sound of sympathy and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. Fletcher's expression had grown somber. "I am very sorry for your loss," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made Clara's eyes burn with unshed tears. "That's a terrible thing to endure, especially alone." "Thank you," Clara managed to say. "I know I look like a vagabond, and I understand if you do not want to offer me work. I will move on to the next town." "No," Fletcher said firmly. The single word carried such authority that both Clara and Maria looked at him in surprise. He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense as they met Clara's. "You have wandered enough, Miss Garrison. If you are willing to work, and I believe you are, then you can stay here. Maria needs help in the house and with the kitchen. We have 20 men who work this ranch, and feeding them is a full-time job. I can offer you room and board, plus wages. There's a small room off the kitchen that you can have. It is not much, but it is private, and it is yours for as long as you want it." Clara stared at him, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You would do that? You do not even know me." "I know enough," Fletcher said. "I know you have had hardship. I know you are willing to work. I know you need a place to land, at least for a while. Consider this that place. Wander no more. Stay here." The unspoken words hung in the air between them, and Clara felt something crack inside her chest, some hardness that had formed around her heart during her months of wandering. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes, Maria said gently, squeezing her shoulder. Say you will stay and let us help you. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Fletcher smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face and made him look younger, less burdened. Good, he said, standing up. Maria, show her to the room and help her get settled. Miss Garrison, you can start work tomorrow. Today, you rest and recover. You look like you could sleep for a week. He left through the back door, and Clara watched him go, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in 10 minutes than she had encountered in 3 months of wandering. Maria helped her to a small room just off the kitchen. It was simple but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a window that looked out over the prairie. To Clara, it looked like a palace. Maria brought her fresh water for washing, a clean nightgown, and fresh linens for the bed. You sleep now, Maria said. Tomorrow's soon enough for work. You are safe here, Nina. Mr. Fletcher, he is a good man. He will take care of you. After Maria left, Clara washed as best she could with the basin of water, marveling at the simple luxury of soap and a clean cloth. She slipped into the nightgown, which was too large for her thin frame but soft and clean. When she lay down on the bed, the mattress felt like heaven compared to the hard ground she had been sleeping on for months. She expected to fall asleep immediately, but instead, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet except for the distant sounds of ranch activity outside. For the first time in 3 months, she felt the tight knot of fear and anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. She had a place to sleep, food to eat, and the promise of work. More than that, she had been seen, truly seen, by someone who had chosen to help rather than turn away. Clara thought about Fletcher Xerxes, his strong presence and kind eyes. She wondered at his generosity, at what kind of man offered sanctuary to a stranger without hesitation. As exhaustion finally claimed her, pulling her down into deep, dreamless sleep, her last thought was that perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally found a place where she could stop running from her grief. The next morning, Clara woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a disoriented moment, she did not know where she was, and panic fluttered in her chest. Then memory returned. The ranch. Fletcher's kindness, Maria's gentle care, and she relaxed back into the pillow with a sigh. Someone had left a simple dress on the chair near her bed, blue cotton with tiny white flowers, worn but clean and mended. There was also a pair of shoes, practical leather boots that looked like they might fit her. Clara dressed quickly, finger-combing her hair and braiding it as best she could without a mirror. The dress fit reasonably well, a bit loose, but infinitely better than the ragged clothing she had been wearing. The boots were slightly too large, but with an extra pair of socks they would do. When she entered the kitchen, Maria was already at work, stirring a massive pot of oatmeal on the stove. The older woman turned and smiled at her. "Buenos dias, Clara. You look better. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Clara admitted. "Thank you for the clothes." "They were mine when I was younger and thinner," Maria said with a laugh, patting her ample hips. "Better they get used than sit in a trunk. Come, I will teach you how we do things here. The men eat breakfast at sunrise, lunch at noon, and dinner at sunset. There are always 20 mouths to feed, sometimes more if Mr. Fletcher has business guests. It is much work, but with 2 of us, it is manageable." Clara spent the morning learning the rhythms of the ranch kitchen. Maria taught her where everything was stored, how much food to prepare, the preferences of various ranch hands. At mid-morning, Fletcher came in through the back door, his boots dusty and his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. "Morning, Maria," he said, then nodded to Clara. "Miss Garrison, I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you, Mr. Xerxes," Clara replied, suddenly shy in his presence in the light of day. "Please, call me Fletcher. We do not stand on formality much around here." He poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove. "Maria taking good care of you?" "She's teaching me everything. I promise I will earn my keep." Fletcher regarded her over the rim of his coffee cup. "I have no doubt of that. If you need anything at all, you let me or Maria know." He left as quickly as he had come, and Clara found herself watching the door after he departed. Maria made a knowing sound, and Clara looked over to find the older woman watching her with an amused expression. "What?" Clara asked, feeling her cheeks heat. "Nothing, Nina, nothing at all." But Maria's smile suggested she had noticed something Clara herself had not yet acknowledged, The days fell into a pattern. Clara rose early to help Maria prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, who ate in a separate dining hall attached to the bunkhouse. After breakfast was cleared, there was bread to bake, vegetables to prepare, laundry to wash, and 100 other tasks that kept her busy until after dinner was served and cleaned up. The work was hard, but Clara welcomed it. It kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, leaving less room for the memories that haunted her. Fletcher appeared at irregular intervals throughout each day, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to discuss the evening menu with Maria, sometimes just to pass through. Clara found herself aware of his presence in a way she had never experienced before. She noticed the way he moved, efficient and purposeful. She noticed his voice, calm but authoritative when he spoke to his men. She noticed his hands, calloused and strong, hands that knew hard work. He was unfailingly polite to her, asking about her day, ensuring she had everything she needed, but maintaining a respectful distance. Clara appreciated this, though she also found herself wishing for more opportunities to speak with him beyond brief exchanges in the kitchen. 2 weeks after her arrival, Fletcher invited her to join him for a walk after dinner. Maria practically pushed Clara out the door, waving away her protests about the evening dishes. "Go, go," Maria said. "The dishes will wait. Mr. Fletcher wants to talk to you." Clara followed Fletcher out into the warm evening air. The sun sat low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, heading toward one of the far corrals where horses grazed peacefully. "You have been here 2 weeks," Fletcher said finally. "How are you finding ranch life?" "I like it," Clara said honestly. "The work is hard, but good. Maria is wonderful. Everyone has been kind to me." "I'm glad." Fletcher leaned against the corral fence, his eyes on the horses. "You have proven yourself a hard worker, just as you claimed. Maria tells me she does not know what she did without you." Clara felt a flush of pride at the compliment. "I am grateful for the opportunity. You took a chance on me when you had no reason to." Fletcher turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "I took a chance because I saw someone who needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. But you have repaid that chance tenfold with your dedication." He paused, seemed to wrestle with something, then said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you plan to stay? Or is this just a temporary stop before you move on again?" The question touched something deep inside Clara, the very thing she had been avoiding thinking about. "I do not know," she admitted quietly. "For 3 months I could not stop moving. Standing still felt impossible, like the grief would catch up and swallow me whole. But being here, it feels different. For the first time since the fire, I feel like I can breathe again." "Then stay," Fletcher said simply. "Stay as long as you want. Make this your home, Clara." The way he said her name, gentle and warm, made her heart skip. She realized with sudden clarity that her awareness of him was not just gratitude or simple appreciation. She was attracted to him, drawn to his strength and kindness, to the way he commanded respect without demanding it, to the quiet competence with which he ran his ranch. "What about you?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "You own this ranch, employ 20 men, but I notice you have no wife, no family around. Do you not get lonely?" Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the horses. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I suppose I do, though I stay busy enough that I do not dwell on it. I built this ranch from nothing, started with 50 head of cattle in a dream 7 years ago. Growing it, maintaining it, that has taken all my focus. But yes, sometimes when the work is done and the house is quiet, I feel the emptiness." "Why have you not married?" Clara asked, then immediately regretted the bold question. "I apologize. That is too personal." "No, it's all right." Fletcher smiled slightly. "I suppose I have not met the right woman. Ranch life is not easy. It takes a special kind of person to thrive out here, to embrace the isolation and the hard work. Most women I have met want an easier life, something closer to town, more social opportunities. I cannot blame them, but it has meant that I have not found someone who wants what I want." Clara understood that more than he knew. She had grown up on a homestead, had known the isolation and hard work of frontier life. It had never frightened her. In fact, she had thrived in it, found satisfaction in the tangible results of her labor. "I think there are more women like that than you might think," she said softly. Women who understand that a good life is not necessarily an easy one, who value hard work and open spaces over social gatherings and town life. Fletcher looked at her intently, and Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks under his gaze. I believe you may be right, he said quietly. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Clara felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of possibility, of mutual attraction that neither was quite ready to voice, but both felt. As they walked back to the house, Fletcher said, I'm glad you're here, Clara. Truly glad. So am I, she replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The weeks turned into a month, then two. Spring gave way to summer, and the ranch thrived under Fletcher's capable management. Clara became an integral part of the household, not just helping Maria, but taking on responsibilities of her own. She discovered a talent for managing supplies and coordinating the complex logistics of feeding a large workforce. She also began working with the ranch's chickens, expanding the small flock and increasing egg production. Her relationship with Fletcher deepened gradually, built on daily interactions and growing trust. He began seeking her opinion on household matters, then on ranch decisions that affected the domestic side of operations. They fell into a habit of evening walks, talking about everything from their childhoods to their dreams for the future. Clara learned that Fletcher had grown up in Missouri, the son of a farmer who drank too much and cared too little. He had left home at 17 with nothing and made his way west, working as a cowhand on various ranches until he saved enough to buy his first cattle and a piece of land. Everything he had built through determination and backbreaking work. In turn, Clara told him more about her life before the fire, about her father's gentle humor and her mother's practical wisdom, about her brother's mischievous grin. Talking about them hurt, but it also helped, as if speaking their names and sharing their memories kept them alive in some way. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the prairie, Fletcher reached over and took Clara's hand. It was the first time he had touched her beyond a polite hand on her elbow, and the contact sent a jolt of electricity through her. Clara, he said, his voice low and serious, I need to tell you something. Her heart pounded. What is it? These past 2 months have been, well, they have been the best months I can remember. And it is because of you. Your presence here has changed everything. The house feels like a home now instead of just a place I sleep. I find myself hurrying through work so I can see you, talk to you. I wake up in the morning looking forward to the day because I know you will be in it. Clara's breath caught. She squeezed his hand, encouraging him to continue. What I am trying to say, and doing poorly, is that I have fallen in love with you. Fletcher turned to face her fully, his blue eyes intense even in the dim light. I know it has only been 2 months. I know you came here broken and grieving, and maybe it is too soon. But I cannot keep this to myself any longer. I love you, Clara Garrison. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you laugh at Maria's jokes and the way you hum while you work. I love your determination and your resilience. I love everything about you. Tears streamed down Clara's face, but they were not tears of sadness. Fletcher, she whispered, I love you too. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you told me to stay, when you offered me sanctuary without judgment or hesitation. You gave me a place to heal, to become myself again. And somewhere in the healing, I fell completely in love with you. Fletcher pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and Clara melted into his embrace. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other while the storm rolled overhead, rain drumming on the porch roof. When they finally pulled apart, Fletcher cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently. It was a kiss full of tenderness and promise, and when it ended, Clara felt like her heart might burst from happiness. Marry me, Fletcher said, his forehead resting against hers. I know it is fast, but I have never been more certain of anything. Marry me, Clara. Make this ranch your home permanently. Build a life with me. Yes, Clara breathed, laughing through her tears. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Wilson's small church. Maria cried happy tears and declared it the best day of her life. The ranch hands cleaned up and attended, grinning and offering boisterous congratulations. The town, which had initially been suspicious of Clara, warmed to her when they learned she was marrying the respected Fletcher Xerxes. The wedding was small and simple, but to Clara it was perfect. She wore a dress that Maria had helped her make, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Fletcher wore his best suit, looking impossibly handsome and slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. When he saw Clara walking down the aisle, his face transformed with such open love and joy that several women in attendance dabbed at their eyes. The ceremony was brief, the vows traditional. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Fletcher kissed Clara with an enthusiasm that made the congregation laugh and cheer. They held a reception at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard, food that Maria had spent days preparing, and a fiddle player providing music. Ranch hands danced with town girls, children ran wild, and Clara felt surrounded by love and community in a way she had not experienced since before the fire. As the sun set and guests began to depart, Fletcher pulled Clara close and whispered in her ear, "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Xerxes?" Clara smiled up at him, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "I have been ready since the day you told me to wander no more." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Fletcher was gentle and patient, attentive to Clara's needs and responses. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the big bed in Fletcher's room, which was now their room, talking quietly until sleep claimed them. The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and deepening love. Clara took on more responsibilities around the ranch, managing not just the domestic sphere, but also getting involved in the business side of operations. She had a sharp mind for numbers and organization, and Fletcher came to rely on her judgment. They weathered challenges together, a brutal winter that killed several head of cattle, a bout of illness that swept through the bunkhouse, a market fluctuation that temporarily affected beef prices. Through it all, they supported each other, their bond growing stronger with each trial they faced and overcame. Maria watched their love grow with satisfaction, often telling Clara that she had known from the first day that they were meant for each other. "The way Mr. Fletcher looked at you," Maria would say, "I knew right then that you were the one who would finally capture his heart." In the spring of 1880, nearly 2 years after Clara first arrived at the ranch, she discovered she was pregnant. She told Fletcher one evening as they sat on the porch, their customary spot for important conversations. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Fletcher looked confused for a moment, then his eyes went wide. Are we?" "Yes," Clara said, laughing at his stunned expression. "We are going to have a baby, probably in early October if my calculations are correct." Fletcher let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses and pulled Clara into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, his eyes were suspiciously wet. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Clara, you have made me the happiest man alive." "We are both going to be parents," Clara said, wiping away her own happy tears. "Can you believe it?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Clara experienced the usual discomforts. Maria fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and work less. Fletcher became almost comically overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing anything remotely strenuous. Clara bore their concern with amused patience, knowing it came from love. She had worried that pregnancy might bring back the grief of losing her family, might make her dwell on the fact that her parents would never meet their grandchild. Those feelings did surface, but they were tempered by joy and hope. Her child would never know its maternal grandparents, but it would know Fletcher's love, and Maria's doting affection would grow up secure on the ranch with wide open spaces to explore. In October, after a long labor that had Fletcher pacing the floor outside their bedroom while Maria and the town doctor attended Clara, a healthy baby boy entered the world. When the doctor finally allowed Fletcher into the room, Clara was propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle wrapped in blue blankets. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Fletcher approached almost reverently, his eyes locked on the tiny face visible in the blankets. When Clara placed the baby in his arms, Fletcher stood frozen, staring down at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is perfect," Fletcher whispered, "absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Fletcher looked at his wife, then back at his son, and said, "I was thinking, if you are agreeable, we might name him after your father." "What was his name?" Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "His name was Samuel Garrison." "Then this is Samuel Xerxes," Fletcher declared, "our son Samuel." Clara nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. Naming their son after her father felt right, a way of honoring the past while celebrating the future. Samuel was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly. He had Clara's dark hair and Fletcher's blue eyes, a combination that made him remarkably handsome even as an infant. Fletcher proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with Samuel when he was fussy, playing with him for hours, showing him off to anyone who would look. Watching Fletcher with their son, Clara fell in love with her husband all over again. She saw a tenderness in him that had always been there, but that fatherhood brought to the surface. He was patient and gentle, singing off key lullabies and making silly faces to elicit baby smiles. The ranch continued to prosper. With Clara's organizational skills and Fletcher's expertise, they expanded operations, purchasing adjacent land and increasing their herd. They hired additional hands, built a new, larger bunkhouse, and improved the facilities. The Xerxes Ranch became known throughout Kansas as one of the finest operations in the state. When Samuel was 2 years old, Clara became pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin daughters in the summer of 1883, identical girls they named Lucy and Rose. The twins were spirited from the start, keeping Clara and Fletcher on their toes. Maria, who had become a surrogate grandmother to Samuel, was absolutely beside herself with joy over having 2 more babies to spoil. The house rang with laughter and the sound of children playing. Samuel took his role as big brother seriously, protective of his little sisters and endlessly patient with their toddler demands. Clara watched her children grow with a heart so full of love it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the children were asleep and she and Fletcher sat together on their porch, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the fire, the loss, the months of wandering. She thought about the day she had stumbled into Wilson, desperate and alone, and how Fletcher had offered her sanctuary with those simple words that had changed everything. Wander no more. Stay here. The grief of losing her first family never completely disappeared, but it had transformed into something softer, a bittersweet ache rather than a sharp pain. She carried their memories with her always, spoke of them to her children so they would know about the grandparents and uncle they had never met. But the grief no longer defined her. Instead, she was defined by love, by the family she and Fletcher had built together, by the home they had created. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised her with a gift, a painting he had commissioned from a traveling artist. It showed the ranch house with Clara standing on the porch, Samuel at her side, the twin girls toddling in the yard, and Fletcher approaching on horseback. The prairie stretched out behind them under a brilliant sunset. "I wanted to capture this," Fletcher said as Clara stared at the painting with tears streaming down her face. "I wanted us to always remember this time, when our children were young and everything felt new and full of possibility." Clara threw her arms around him. "It is perfect. Everything is perfect. You are perfect." "Not perfect," Fletcher said with a laugh, "but happy. So very happy." As the years passed, the Xerxes family grew and thrived. Samuel grew into a responsible young man who showed early aptitude for ranch management. The twins, while identical in appearance, developed distinct personalities. Lucy bold and adventurous, Rose thoughtful and artistic. In 1886, Clara gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel, and 2 years later, a daughter they called Grace. The ranch house, which had once seemed so large, filled with the chaos and joy of 5 children. Additions were built to accommodate the growing family, extra bedrooms and a larger dining room where they all gathered for meals. Maria, though growing older, refused to fully retire, insisting that she was needed to help with the children and the ever-present task of feeding ranch hands. Clara and Fletcher's love deepened with each passing year. They still took evening walks when they could steal the time, still talked for hours about everything and nothing. The passion between them remained strong, tempered now by the comfort of long familiarity and shared history. Fletcher often told Clara that she was his miracle, the unexpected gift that had transformed his life. Clara always replied that he was her salvation, the man who had seen her at her lowest point and offered her not just help, but a future. In 1890, when Samuel turned 10 and began taking on real responsibilities around the ranch, Clara stood at the porch railing one evening and looked out over the land that had become her home. 12 years had passed since that hot August day when she had walked into the ranch yard, desperate and alone. 12 years since Fletcher had looked at her with kind eyes and told her she could stay. So much had changed. She had changed from a girl broken by tragedy to a woman strong in love and purpose. The ranch had changed, grown, and prospered, but some things remained constant. The Kansas prairie stretching endlessly under the big sky, the rhythm of ranch life, and the love between her and Fletcher that was the foundation of everything. Fletcher came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Clara said. "The day we met, how lost I was, how you saved me." "You saved yourself," Fletcher corrected gently. "I just gave you a safe place to do it." "You gave me more than that. You gave me a home, a family, a reason to stop running and start living again. You gave me yourself, your love, and that made all the difference." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink. From inside the house, they could hear the children laughing, Samuel's voice rising above the others as he told his siblings some story. Maria called out that dinner was ready, her tone affectionately exasperated. "We should go in," Fletcher said, but neither of them moved immediately, savoring the moment of peace. "In a minute," Clara said. "I just want to stand here with you a little longer." Fletcher tightened his arms around her, and Clara leaned back into his embrace, utterly content. She thought about the girl she had been, wandering the prairie with no destination and no hope. She thought about how close she had come to simply giving up, to disappearing into the vastness of the West. But she had not given up. She had kept walking, kept surviving, until that walk had brought her here, to this man, to this life. It was not the life she had imagined when she was young, not the life she had been living before the fire. It was something different, something built from the ashes of tragedy and loss. Yet it was a good life, a beautiful life, full of love and laughter and the satisfaction of hard work. She had stopped wandering and found her place. More than that, she had found herself again, not the girl she had been before the fire, but the woman she had become through surviving it. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Fletcher replied, "now and always." They went inside to join their children for dinner, to the warmth and noise and controlled chaos of family life. As Clara took her seat at the table, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the wandering that had led her home. The years continued to unfold with the predictable rhythm of ranch life, mixed with the unpredictable joys and challenges of raising a large family. Samuel grew into a young man who was clearly his father's son, tall and strong with Fletcher's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. He took to ranching naturally, learning everything Fletcher could teach him about managing cattle, negotiating with buyers, and caring for the land. The twins, Lucy and Rose, kept everyone entertained with their antics. Though identical in appearance, their personalities could not have been more different. Lucy was fearless, always climbing trees, racing horses, and getting into mischief that made Clara's heart stop. Rose was quieter, preferring books and drawing to outdoor adventures, though she was fiercely loyal to her twin and would defend her sister's wild behavior to anyone who criticized it. Daniel, born in 1886, was a sweet-natured boy who loved animals. He spent hours in the barn with the horses, learning their temperaments and earning their trust. Fletcher often said that Daniel had a gift with livestock that could not be taught, something instinctive that made him valuable even at his young age. Grace, the baby of the family born in 1888, was precocious and charming, able to wrap both her parents and her older siblings around her little finger with a smile. She was clever and curious, always asking questions that sometimes left Clara scrambling for age-appropriate answers. In 1891, when the ranch was at its peak prosperity, tragedy struck again. Maria, who had become such an integral part of their family, passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 68. Her death hit everyone hard, but especially Clara, who had come to love the older woman like a mother. The funeral was held at the ranch, attended by everyone who had known and loved Maria. Fletcher delivered a eulogy that had everyone in tears, speaking of Maria's kindness, her wisdom, and the way she had made the ranch house a true home. Clara could barely speak through her grief, holding baby Grace close and accepting the condolences of friends and neighbors. In the days after Maria's death, Clara struggled with the familiar weight of grief, but this time she was not alone in her sorrow. Fletcher held her when she cried, the children offered their own forms of comfort, and slowly, the acute pain faded into the dull ache of loss that she remembered from losing her first family. Maria's death reminded Clara how precious life was, how quickly it could be taken away. She became more conscious of savoring moments with her children, of not letting the daily demands of ranch life prevent her from truly being present with her family. She and Fletcher made a point of gathering the entire family for dinner every evening, no matter how busy the day had been, using that time to connect and share. Samuel turned 16 in 1896, and Fletcher began seriously discussing the future of the ranch with him. It was clear that Samuel would one day take over operations, and Fletcher wanted to prepare him properly. They spent long hours discussing breeding strategies, land management, market conditions, and all the other complex factors that went into running a successful ranch. Clara watched her son become a man and felt the bittersweet pang that all mothers feel when their children grow up. Samuel was a good young man, responsible and hard-working, and she was proud of him. But part of her mourned the little boy who used to climb into her lap for stories and who thought his father could do anything. The twins were 14 in 1897, approaching the age where they would need to make decisions about their futures. Lucy declared her intention to stay on the ranch and learn ranching just like Samuel. She had no interest in the traditional domestic pursuits expected of young women and argued passionately with anyone who suggested she should be learning to be a proper lady. Fletcher supported Lucy's ambitions, much to the shock of some of their more traditional neighbors. "This is 1897, he would say. "Women can do more than cook and sew. If Lucy wants to ranch, I will teach her just like I taught Samuel." Rose, meanwhile, showed remarkable artistic talent. Her drawings and paintings were sophisticated beyond her years, capturing the beauty of the prairie and ranch life with an accuracy and emotion that impressed everyone who saw her work. Clara and Fletcher discussed sending her to study with a proper art teacher, perhaps even to an art school back east when she was older. Daniel, at 11, remained devoted to the horses. Fletcher put him in charge of the ranch's breeding program, a responsibility Daniel took seriously. He kept meticulous records, studied bloodlines, and showed an intuitive understanding of what would produce strong, healthy foals. Grace, at 9, was beginning to show an interest in learning. She devoured every book in the house and begged her parents for more. Fletcher ended up ordering books from St. Louis and Kansas City, building a small library for his youngest daughter's voracious reading habit. As the century drew to a close, the Xerxes Ranch stood as a testament to what hard work, smart management, and dedication could achieve. The original property had expanded significantly, encompassing thousands of acres and supporting a herd of over 2,000 head of cattle. The ranch employed nearly 50 men, a small army of cowboys, ranch hands, and specialists. Fletcher, now 44, had touches of gray in his dark hair but was still strong and vital. He and Clara had built something lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. They often talked about the future, about Samuel eventually taking over, about making sure all their children were provided for, about the legacy they would leave. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, Fletcher took Clara back to the spot where he had first offered her work, where he had essentially told her to wander no more and stay. It was a beautiful summer evening, similar to that fateful day 2 decades earlier. 20 years, Fletcher marveled, holding Clara close. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you walked into my life. Other times it feels like you have always been here." "I feel the same," Clara said. "I can barely remember life before you, before this place. It seems like another lifetime, like it happened to someone else." "Do you ever regret it?" Fletcher asked. "Staying, I mean, marrying me. This life is not easy, and you had to work so hard." Clara turned to face him fully, cupping his weathered face in her hands. I have never regretted it for a single moment. You gave me everything, Fletcher. When I had nothing, when I was lost and alone and broken, you gave me a home and a purpose. And then you gave me your love and our children and this beautiful life we have built together. How could I possibly regret any of that?" Fletcher kissed her tenderly. "I am the lucky one. I had built this ranch, had everything a man could want materially, but I was empty inside. Then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even known to make. You filled the emptiness, Clara. You made everything meaningful." They made love that night with the passion and tenderness that comes from 20 years of intimacy, of knowing each other's bodies and hearts completely. Afterward, lying in their bed in the house they had filled with children and love, Clara thought about the remarkable journey of her life. She had known tremendous loss, the kind of tragedy that breaks some people completely. For a time, it had broken her, sent her wandering without direction or hope, but she had survived, had kept putting one foot in front of the other until those steps had led her to Fletcher. He had offered her sanctuary, but what he had really offered was a second chance, an opportunity to build a new life from the ruins of the old. She had taken that chance, had worked hard and opened her heart, and the result was more beautiful than she could have imagined. The new century arrived with celebration and anticipation. The year 1900 felt significant, a turning point, and the Xerxes family welcomed it with a party at the ranch. Friends and neighbors gathered to eat, drink, dance, and speculate about what the new century would bring. Samuel, now 20, had grown into a formidable young man, fully capable of running the ranch on his own, though he continued to defer to his father's experience. Several young women in Wilson had their eye on him, but Samuel seemed in no hurry to settle down, content to focus on the ranch and his responsibilities. The twins, at 18, were young women now. Lucy worked alongside Samuel and Fletcher, as capable as any of the male ranch hands. She could rope a steer, break a horse, and manage cattle drives with the best of them. Rose had developed into a talented artist whose paintings were beginning to sell in Kansas City galleries, though she still lived at home and helped with household tasks. Daniel, at 14, had proven himself invaluable with the horses. The breeding program he managed produced some of the finest horses in Kansas, and buyers came from across the state to purchase Xerxes Ranch stock. Grace, at 12, was the most educated member of the family, having read more books than anyone else, and being able to discuss literature, history, and science with remarkable sophistication. Fletcher looked at his family gathered around the table on that first day of the new century, and felt overwhelming gratitude. He had built something that would last, not just a successful ranch, but a family legacy. His children were strong, capable, good people who would carry the Xerxes name forward with honor. But more than anything, he was grateful for Clara. She was 52 now, with threads of silver in her dark hair and fine lines around her eyes. But to Fletcher, she was as beautiful as the day he first saw her walking into his ranch yard, desperate and determined. She was his partner in every sense, in building the ranch, raising their children, navigating life's challenges and joys. As if sensing his gaze, Clara looked up from her conversation with Rose and met his eyes across the table. She smiled, that special smile she reserved just for him, and Fletcher felt his heart swell with love. 22 years, and she still had the power to make his breath catch. The first decade of the 20th century brought changes to the Xerxes Ranch and family. Samuel married in 1902 a lovely young woman named Elizabeth from Wilson. The wedding was a grand affair, the biggest celebration the ranch had ever hosted. Samuel brought his bride to the ranch, where Fletcher had built them a small house on the property, close enough to be part of the ranch operations, but far enough to give the young couple privacy. When Elizabeth gave birth to the first grandchild, a boy named Fletcher after his grandfather in 1903, Clara experienced the unique joy of becoming a grandmother. Holding that tiny baby, seeing her son as a father, watching the cycle of life continue, filled her with emotion she could not adequately express. Lucy, to everyone's surprise except perhaps her twins, fell in love with one of the ranch hands in 1904. A quiet, capable man named Jack who treated her as an equal and supported her unconventional interests. They married in a simple ceremony and continued working on the ranch together, a team in every sense. Rose moved to Kansas City in 1905 to pursue her art seriously. It was difficult for Clara to let her go, but Rose promised to visit frequently and write often. She kept her promise, her letters full of descriptions of city life and her growing success as an artist. Clara kept every letter, treasuring these glimpses into her daughter's independent life. Daniel, showing no interest in leaving the ranch, continued his work with the horses. In 1906, he met a young woman named Sarah, whose family owned a horse farm in Missouri. Their shared passion for horses brought them together, and they married in 1907, with Sarah moving to the ranch and joining Daniel in managing the breeding program. Grace, the baby of the family, proved to be the most ambitious of all the children. She wanted to go to college, a controversial decision for a young woman in 1906, but Fletcher and Clara supported her dreams. She attended the University of Kansas, studying literature and journalism, writing letters home about her classes and experiences. She graduated in 1910, one of only a handful of women in her class, and returned home to work as a correspondent for a Kansas City newspaper, writing about ranch life in the changing West. Throughout all these changes, Fletcher and Clara remained the stable center of the family. They were in their 50s now, no longer young but not yet old, still vigorous and active, though perhaps a bit slower than in their youth. They had weathered storms together, both literal and metaphorical, their partnership deepening with each passing year. In 1912, on a warm summer evening, Clara and Fletcher sat on their porch, as they had done countless times over the past 34 years. Their grandchildren played in the yard under the watchful eyes of their parents. The ranch bustled with activity, prosperous and thriving. "Do you remember the day we met?" Fletcher asked, taking Clara's hand. "Every detail," Clara replied. "I was so desperate, so lost. You looked at me with such kindness, and when you offered me work and a place to stay, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months." "I knew right then that you were special," Fletcher said. "I could not have predicted all of this, our marriage, our children, the life we would build, but I knew you were important. Something in my heart recognized you." Clara squeezed his hand. "You told me to wander no more, to stay. Those words changed everything. They gave me permission to stop running from my grief, to plant roots again. You gave me a home, Fletcher, but more than that, you gave me myself back." "And you gave me more than I knew I was missing," Fletcher replied. "A true partner, a family, love that sustained me through everything. You made my house a home and my life complete." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie they both loved. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink, the same colors that had painted the sky on that long-ago day when Clara first arrived. "I never imagined," Clara said softly, "when I was wandering those dusty roads, hungry and alone and broken, that I would end up here. That I would have this, a husband I adore, 5 incredible children, grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a life so full of love and purpose. It seems impossible, like a dream. But it is real," Fletcher said. "Every moment, every struggle, every joy, all of it real. We built this together, Clara. This family, this legacy, it is ours." Clara thought about the girl she had been at 22, devastated by loss and wandering without direction. She thought about how easily she could have simply given up, could have let despair claim her. But she had kept going, had survived, and that survival had led her here. Sometimes she still dreamed of the fire, still woke in the night with her heart pounding and the phantom smell of smoke in her nostrils. But Fletcher was always there, pulling her close and murmuring reassurances until the nightmare faded. The grief of losing her first family had never completely disappeared, but it had been absorbed into the larger tapestry of her life, one thread among many rather than the only thread that mattered. She had learned that healing was not about forgetting or replacing what was lost. It was about allowing new love and new experiences to exist alongside the old grief, creating a life rich and complex and ultimately beautiful in its fullness. "Thank you," Clara said, turning to look at Fletcher with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for helping me, for loving me. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop wandering and start living again." Fletcher pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Thank you for staying, for choosing to build a life with me, for being my partner and my love for all these years." As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Kansas sky, Clara and Fletcher remained on their porch, holding each other and watching their family. The grandchildren were called inside for bedtime, their protests and laughter floating on the evening air. Lights appeared in windows throughout the ranch property, small beacons of warmth and life. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, the same landscape that had witnessed Clara's desperate wandering so many years ago. But now it was home, every familiar rise and hollow beloved, every inch of it bound up with memories of the life she and Fletcher had created together. Clara had wandered, but she wandered no more. She had found her place, her purpose, her person. She had found home in the most unexpected way, through tragedy and survival and the kindness of a cowboy who offered sanctuary to a stranger. And in finding home, she had found herself, not the girl who had fled a burning homestead, but the woman who had survived that fire and everything that came after, the woman who had chosen to stay and build and love despite knowing how much could be lost. It was a good life, she thought, as sleep began to claim her that night, lying safe in Fletcher's arms in the bed they had shared for over 30 years. A life built from ashes and wandering, from chance and choice, from survival and love. A life that proved that even the deepest losses could be survived, that new chapters could be written after tragedy, that happiness could be found again by those brave enough to reach for it. Clara's last thought before sleep took her was one of profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this moment, for the man beside her who had made all the difference, for the family they had created together, and for the simple, miraculous fact that she had survived long enough to find her way home. The years continued to flow like the rivers across the Kansas plains, sometimes calm and steady, sometimes wild and turbulent, but always moving forward. Clara and Fletcher grew older together, their hair turning silver, their steps perhaps a bit slower, but their love remaining as strong as ever. Samuel took over day-to-day management of the ranch in 1915 when Fletcher was 60 and decided it was time to step back from the demanding physical work. But Fletcher remained involved, advising and consulting, enjoying the role of elder statesman rather than active foreman. He and Clara spent more time together, taking long rides across the ranch property, visiting their children and growing number of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company after a lifetime of hard work. The First World War touched their family when two of Samuel's sons enlisted in 1917. The war was far away, fought in foreign lands that seemed unreal to people who had spent their lives on the Kansas prairie. But the fear was real, and Clara spent anxious months waiting for news, praying for the safety of her grandsons. Both young men returned home safely in 1919, changed by what they had experienced but alive and whole, and the family's relief was profound. By 1920, the Xerxes Ranch had been in operation for over 40 years, a testament to Fletcher's vision and the hard work of everyone involved. The ranch had survived droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and changes in the cattle industry, adapting and evolving while maintaining its core identity. Clara was 62, Fletcher was 65, and they had been married for 41 years. They had 5 children, 14 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. The small ranch that Fletcher had built with determination and sweat had become a family empire, generations of Xerxes who would carry forward the legacy. On a summer evening in 1920, Clara and Fletcher sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times over the decades. The routine never grew old, this quiet time together, watching the day end and the night begin. 42 years since you walked into my life, Fletcher said, his voice perhaps not as strong as it once was, but still warm with love. Best 42 years a man could ask for. 42 years since you told me to stay, Clara replied, taking his weathered hand in hers. I was so lost, Fletcher. I did not know if I could ever find my way back to being whole. But you helped me find myself again. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything, Fletcher corrected. This life, this family, we built it together. Every step of the way, partners. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, utterly content. The prairie sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, a daily reminder of the beauty that surrounded them. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed, a familiar sound that had been the soundtrack of their life together. She thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment, from a burning homestead to desperate wandering to finding unexpected sanctuary with a cowboy who saw her when she felt invisible. She thought about the love they had built, tested by time and trials but never broken, only strengthened. By, if I could go back, Clara said softly, and talk to that girl who was wandering the roads, hungry and alone and so afraid, I would tell her to keep going. I would tell her that salvation is coming, that a man with kind blue eyes will offer her a home, and that if she is brave enough to accept it, her whole life will change. I would tell her about the love waiting for her, the family she will build, the happiness that seems impossible from where she stands. What would you tell yourself? Fletcher asked. If you could go back to the man I was before you arrived? Clara considered this. I would tell you that your life is about to gain meaning you never imagined, that a woman will walk into your ranch yard and straight into your heart, that you will build something beautiful together, not just a successful ranch, but a real legacy of love and family. I would tell you to hold on to her tight and never let go, because she is going to be the best thing that ever happens to you. I would not need to be told, Fletcher said with a smile. I knew that the moment I saw you, something in my heart recognized you as mine. They sat together as darkness fell, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love that sustained them. The years had been kind in some ways, harsh in others, but through it all, they had each other. That had made all the difference. Clara had stopped wandering 42 years ago when a cowboy told her to stay. In staying, she had found everything she never knew she needed, everything she thought she had lost forever. She had found home and love and herself. And as the stars emerged in the vast Kansas sky, shining down on the ranch that was her sanctuary and her legacy, Clara Xerxes closed her eyes and gave thanks for the journey that had brought her home, for the wandering that had led to staying, for the loss that had eventually led to finding everything she had ever wanted. She had wandered, but she wandered no more. She had found her place, her person, her purpose, and in the end, that made every hard step of the journey worthwhile.